will be November 14 to 18 in Boston, Massachusetts. GSA's highest attended meeting ever was in Boston, and we are looking forward to breaking that record in 2018. The meeting theme is the purposes of longer lives. Now, back in San Francisco, keynote speakers at that meeting talked about society gaining an 8th day of the week and a longevity dividend. And in that vein, the 2018 theme continues it, even reaching back to echo the question from a seminal book in 1975 by Robert Butler, Why Survive? And even deeper is continuity with the very first issue of GSA's Journal of Gerontology that came with the slogan on its cover to add years to life, not just life to years. So why indeed longer lives? What are they for? The meeting theme invites GSA to think about these questions. More time is certainly a personal benefit for every sort of human activity, aspiration, emotion, and relationship. More time is good. But beyond the personal, are there community or social benefits from longer lives? And do extended lives gain us particular scientific insights or advances? And what do longer lives mean ultimately for our humanity? Now that's the meeting theme. Does your abstract need to address this theme? Not at all, no. There will be, at the meeting, there will be content and presentations on this topic, and you can benefit from this and learn from this, but your responsibility is to bring us your best research and scholarship on whatever topic is your passion. Now, you won't, at the meeting, want to miss the opening plenary speaker, Henry Louis Gates, Jr. When I was thinking about longer lives, it occurred to me that one of the things we have is more elders among us. And what is their value to us, these people who have seen more life than we have? This is a perfect question, I think, to put to a historian. And so we have invited Henry Louis Gates, Jr. of Harvard University to enlighten us on this point, to share his thoughts on the value of elders. You may be familiar with Professor Gates from his celebrated works on African American literature and culture, and you may have seen him hosting television programs like the PBS Ancestry series, Finding Your Roots. So as I said, you will want to be there. So now let's dive into the details of the call for abstracts. The submission site opens February 1st, and the deadline to submit is March 15th. The annual meeting program is developed primarily from submitted abstracts. Therefore, the success of the meeting relies heavily upon the quality of the abstracts submitted, which is why we need you to submit. There is no limit to the number of abstracts you may submit, but please note, we cannot guarantee conflicts when scheduling, and the committee tries to accept as many different people onto the program for a wide variety of expertise. Being on the program allows you to expand your CV, to gain experience with presenting your research in front of an audience. It expands the field by promoting your research. It's going to make us happy that you are there. You will also be able to network and collaborate with other individuals, making connections that could lead to further research and advances for your career. Come to GSA and meet the people whose work you've been reading. And finally, by presenting, you'll become a published author in our journal, Innovation and Aging. One more thing that I would say is that if you are at all receiving public support in the form of some support for educational expenses or some sort of research or grant support, you also have a responsibility to share this with the public and to share this with the scientific community, and coming to GSA is one way that you can discharge that. So many reasons to present at GSA. Well, there are lots of parts to the abstract submission process, and because of that, Mercedes will discuss next how to prepare for your submission.
Thank you, Dave. Wonderful. You're getting us all excited about submitting an abstract for the 2018 GSA. I want to let our listeners know that there's many things you can do right now. You do not have to wait until March 15th. In fact, I hope you don't wait until the last minute to get your information together to pull your abstract together. So yes, the abstract deadline is March 15th, but let's talk about some things you can do now to make that process pain-free. It's important that you log in well before you plan to actually do your final submission. And so if you log in, you're going to have some information in order to log in. And some of us don't realize that we don't have all our information together. And so that's why it's important that you know your username and your password. And if you happen to forget your username and password, then you can go to the GSA website and put in your email, and they'll email you your username and password. You will also need to have an account. So if you don't have an account with GSA already, maybe you've never been to a GSA meeting before, you're not a member, then you'll need to create an account, and that'll take some time. So that's another reason to not wait until the last minute. Once you get logged in, go ahead and click on My Account, and then select Abstract Central to enter the abstract that you are preparing. All right. GSA is no longer using Scholar One. So those of you who have been submitting for the GSA meeting for many years, this is a big change. Those of you who are brand new, you won't notice because it'll be the first time. We're now using a software called Cadmium CD. And I would invite you to take some time to log in and familiarize yourself with the new look and the new feel of their site, because it is a little bit different than what we have done in the past. You'll be happy to know that there are several instructional videos that you can watch that will actually walk you through the steps of preparing your abstract and submitting the abstracts. I highly recommend that you gather all the material that you're going to need for the abstract before you begin the process of trying to submit the information, and try to do it well in advance of the deadline. In fact, I would suggest that you try to do it by the end of the first week in March. GSA's developed a great planning guide and even some worksheets that people can now use. And if you go through the planning guide and the worksheets, you will have collected all the information that you're going to need to actually submit the official abstract. Please bear in mind that we ask for a lot of information on the abstract because that information is used in a lot of different ways. It goes into the program book, it goes into the abstract book, and it goes into the mobile app. And all three of those are ways in which people find out about your presentation. And you want as many people to find out about your presentation as possible so you have good attendance. I'm talking about presentations. There's actually 3 different kinds of presentation types at the GSA meeting. You can either submit an abstract to be considered as a paper, or as a poster, or as a symposium. And I'm just going to say a few words about each of those 3 options, and there's plenty of information about them on the planning guides if you want to learn more. If you submit a paper and your paper is accepted, your paper will be grouped with 4 or 5 other papers, and then the 4 or 5 of you will share a 90-minute time slot. So if you're going to be submitting your research through a paper, make sure that you practice ahead of time so that you stick to the allotted time. You might have 9 minutes, you might have 12 minutes for your particular paper, depending on how many papers are sharing that time slot. If you do a poster, you'll be asked to create a poster, a physical poster on a board that's 4 feet by 8 feet. All the posters are on display for 2 hours, and that we ask that you are there actually present for at least one of those hours so that people can come by and meet you and talk with you individually about your research featured on the poster. People will be asked when you submit the abstract, do you prefer to be a poster or do you prefer to present your information through a paper? But please know that these 2 approaches may be switched by GSA staff because we need to balance out the number of papers and the number of posters. So we're interested in knowing your first choice, but we also hope you'll be flexible in case we ask you to present in a way different than what you had indicated as your first choice. If you're part of a symposium, this is a different kind of an animal. The symposium is actually a collection of 2 or 3 papers, and it's organized by a chair. So somebody comes up with the idea for a symposium and invites other people to submit their papers underneath that topic. And then those abstracts are submitted as part of a symposium. So if you're going to be presenting a paper and you are not part of a symposium, then you'll just use the approach where you submit an individual paper. Either way, there's an abstract process, and we ask that you pay attention to the details because it makes it a lot easier for our reviewers to assess your information if you follow the directions. There's a limit on the title to 100 characters. There's a certain format for the title. Each person's asked to submit at least 2 objectives. You can have up to 3 objectives. We'd like to have these objectives measurable and specific. The body for the paper or the poster or the symposium abstract overview maybe up to 250 words, and then the individual symposium abstracts 150 words. I don't expect you to remember any of these details, but I want you to know that there are guidelines and they are written down, and it makes it so much easier for our reviewers to assess your work when you follow the guidelines. The GSA program is organized around the 4 GSA sections. And so symposium submissions have the option to be submitted under one of those 4 GSA sections or a new section called the interdisciplinary section. When you submit an abstract, you're applying to one of these 5 areas. And if you'd like more information about the descriptions of the sections, check out the planning guide. All abstracts that are submitted will be asked to indicate a session code or a keyword. So please be prepared to select 1 or 2 session codes which closely align with the focus of your abstract. The session code selection is important because this is how the reviewers will be assigned to review your abstract, and how the abstracts are grouped together into sessions, and how the scheduling is completed to avoid topic overlap. So please be very deliberate about selecting your session codes. Author details required will include your contact information, the highest degree earned, and then up to 3 affiliations. We're asking that your CV be uploaded, and also a conflict of interest disclosure form will need to be completed. And so you see why it would really help to get all this information gathered ahead of time, because there is a lot of information to be submitted along with the actual abstract. You'll have the option to allow individuals to submit their own author details, and this is for people doing a symposium, or to send them all to the symposium planner, and the symposium planner can set it up. Either way, all the information has to be submitted to GSA by the March 15th deadline. Rachel, do we have any questions from the audience before I turn the mic over to John?
Hi, Marcy. Yes, thanks. We have a couple. I'll go ahead and start with the first one. Why do we have to complete a conflict of disclosure?
Well, that's a good question. It's important to remember that the GSA annual meeting is accredited to provide continuing education units. And because of this, the accreditation programs need to know about the conflict of interest. And so in order to get the CEUs for our participants, we ask the presenters to complete the conflict of disclosure.
Great, thank you. And you mentioned about the program being organized around the 4 GSA sections and interdisciplinary. If I belong to one or affiliate with one GSA section, do I have to submit to that section, or can I submit to any section where I think my work would be appropriate?
You're going to submit your abstract into the section where you think your work would be appropriate.
And this is Dave Ekerdt jumping in, and that means that if you're, for example, you're in the behavioral social science section and you say, well, I'd like to submit, I think I have something here I want to submit to health sciences. It's a matter of what kind of reviewers you'd like to get. Would you like to get them from behavioral sciences, or would you like to get them from the health sciences? And that's really the difference that it's going to make. For example, on a topic such as mental health, which kind of reviewers would you like for on mental health, or which sort of reviewers would you like for a topic on dementia?
And also, you'll be, if your abstract is accepted, you will be put in a session with other papers in that same section. So you can think about with which section you'd like to be grouped if you're submitting a paper, and also if you're doing a poster, we'll do the posters by section as well. Any other questions?
Yeah, one last question. You mentioned the various presentation types with student and poster right now, but will there also be a late-breaking submission option later on in the process?
Oh, I'm glad you brought that up. Yes, so to repeat, the official deadline to submit an abstract is March 15th. However, the meeting is not till November, and sometimes there are research findings that occur after March or other topics that are extremely timely. And so GSA does have what they call a late breaker poster session, which opens up in July, and the deadline's in September. And this submission is appropriate for really late-breaking research. This is not to be meant for people who didn't make the March 15th deadline. You're going to be asked, what makes your late breaker session truly a late breaker? And so we welcome late breaker sessions, and the call for that will be from July to mid-September. Another point I should make is the abstracts all should be reporting completed research. If you're doing a research study, it should be about completed research. And so you will be submitting your March 15th abstract about research that you have completed and you actually have findings for. If you don't quite have your findings, then please consider it for next year, or if it would be appropriate for a late breaker, you consider it for then. But we're looking for abstracts that have their findings completed if they're empirical research. We also accept abstracts that are not limited to empirical research, so more theoretical abstracts are accepted also. But you should have your conclusions figured out by the time you submit your abstract. All right, I think we should go on to John then.
Great. Well, thanks, Merce, and thanks for all that very helpful information. It's a very good, I think, setup for my presentation. And again, I'm John Beilenson, President of Strategic Communications and Planning, and we're a socially responsible communications and public relations firm just outside of Philadelphia. And we work with a variety of nonprofit organizations, foundations, government agencies, and academic innovators, helping them to use communications to generate all sorts of social good, social change. During the last 10 years, we in particular, actually even 15 years, we have worked with GSA and the John A. Hartford Foundation and other groups to do a wide variety of training for mostly junior academic folks at the beginning and middle of their careers, to help them think about communications as a mode of sort of academic leadership. And we've helped folks think about their messaging and about posters and about podium presentations. So today I'm really pleased to join this this conversation and this presentation. I want to thank GSA for including me. and to talk a little bit about abstracts. So if we go to the next slide, each year there are 2,000 plus abstracts submitted to the GSA annual meeting. So it's important to make your abstracts readable and relatable, and it's important to make your abstract stand out from the crowd. And just before I kind of jump into sort of some suggestions about how particularly to do that, the first thing to do, and I'm echoing I think Merce here, is that it's important to prepare to kind of start the process not only of submitting the your abstract, but of even thinking about the abstract, well in advance, so that you're not trying to pull something together at the last minute. There is a good deal of thinking and writing that's needed to be done before before you're able to submit the best abstract possible. So in order to kind of help make sure that your abstract stands out, you first of all have to make sure that you're in the crowd, even before you want to stand out from the crowd. And again, for the folks that are on this webinar, certainly you kind of understand the need to do your homework and to understand the process at GSA. There's lots of guidance that's available online that was just described. It's important that you understand what the right form and style is for the abstract, that your length and presentation type, the length of your abstract is appropriate to the presentation type, and even if possible, and again as Dr. Ekerdt suggests, it's not necessary, but if it is possible to connect your research to the theme of the purposes of longer lives, that will certainly be helpful, again, though not necessary. So again, it's important to get the basics right, because if you don't get the basics right, you end up your submission won't be either it won't be reviewed at all, or it won't be certainly reviewed particularly positively. The second thing to think about in terms of your abstract, and we go to the next slide, is that you want to think about, and again, this is important to think ahead here, and not to get all the way up to March 14th or March 13th without doing this thinking ahead of time, but to spend a little time with your colleagues, perhaps with mentors, to understand what it is that you're trying to say, to understand your message. An abstract is the distillation of likely quite a complex body of research, and it often takes time and a number of iterations to get clear on what it is actually what the core sort of learnings or the core findings, the core message is about that research. And in order to do that, we like to think about a sort of a three-pronged sort of approach, a three-step sort of process to kind of understand your message, particularly around research. And basically, if you can fill in the blanks here for your science, this will help you, again, do the necessary sort of intellectual preparation that will enable you to write a clear and distinctive abstract. So the first thing you really want to do is to answer the so what question, right? So why is this research important? So the reason my research is important is. The second thing you want to make sure that so that you have to provide a sense of context and background so that people understand why they should care about this research. The second thing you want to do is to actually distill out the one thing that people need to know about my research, right? And to understand that in one sentence or two sentences as clearly, as distinctively, as persuasively as possible. And finally, you want to be able to answer or fill in the blank here. The implications of my research are, so that by completing that sentence, you are able to again point to the broader sort of rationale for the work, and to point to why the reviewers particularly should pay attention to your research and pay attention to your abstract. And by kind of answering these questions or filling in these blanks, it provides you with a lot of the preparation you will need then to create a strong abstract. And we'll talk a little bit about sort of exactly the specific parts of the abstract in just a second. But if we go to the next slide, I want to encourage people first of all, to spend some time thinking about their title, because once they have their message, you can then start to think about sort of what is the most sort of distinctive and the most powerful way of describing your search in 100 characters or less, and to make sure that it is actually descriptive of your message, that is, it is, if possible, sort of declarative. Many abstract titles and research titles are not declarative, in fact, are much more descriptive. I would argue that being able to describe in the title the actual findings and what you found is beneficial and enables the abstract reader and ultimately the person deciding whether or not to come to your session to get a very quick and immediate sense of what the research is about. You certainly want to understand and communicate through the title what the results of that of your research have been. And then finally, you want to perhaps be creative, if possible, to use a turn of phrase or some other language to enable you to kind of connect to folks and to kind of demonstrate that a sense of interest and excitement about the work that you're about to present. And then finally, again, if you're able to connect to the theme or topic, that would be great as well. But of course, as we've just described, this is harder, particularly in the biological sciences. But again, certainly not something that is required to enable you to submit an abstract that is accepted. If you go to the next page, I did pull out a number of titles, sample titles, to kind of give you a sense of the structure of those titles. I think all writing is sort of genre writing, so here's some samples that you might emulate, and some aspects of this of titles that you might emulate. And the first couple you see is age more than a number and bidding the medical model goodbye. Some turns of phrase that are sort of a little bit more creative than the typical descriptive title, and again provides you with a way of grabbing people's attention. The third one here on the bottom left, proxy decision makers choose less aggressive end-of-life interventions than patients, I think is a good example of a declarative title that again lets people know from the get-go what your research has found and what they can expect to read in the abstract and find out at your session. And then in the other two on the other side, there's the use of a question, which I think can be helpful in terms of drawing people into the research or into the abstract. At the same token, I think you want to be careful with the question because it oftentimes doesn't give people enough information to understand exactly what you're about and to drive people to a clear understanding of what the research is meant to be communicating. So thinking carefully about whether to use a question in the title, I think is important, but again, in these cases, I think is relatively effective. And again, another option for you as you think about your title. You can go to the next slide. Most important is again to cover the ground in your abstract. Again, you'll have 150 words or 250 words depending on the type of abstract you're submitting. But you'll certainly want to cover at least these four categories or headings in the abstract. First of all, to describe the sort of the background, the context for the research. Second, kind of explaining again very briefly sort of what it is you did and the methodology of the research, because that's critical in again describing the science that you've undertaken. Obviously, most importantly, you really want to have a clear and distinctive description of what you learned, your findings or results in the abstract. And finally, you want to be able to describe your implications. So what this means for the research, for the field, for the country, for older people. So you're in doing that, you might look at using actually these kinds of headings for, let's say, background or methodology findings or implications. Although I will say in reviewing a number of the abstracts from previous meetings, they oftentimes each of these topics are covered in the course of a single paragraph, or sometimes two paragraphs, but generally a single paragraph without heading. So you have a choice, but again, regardless of how you structure it, on the page, you want to make sure to cover all of this ground as you work your way through your abstract. In terms of things to avoid, if you go to the next page, and again, you'll kind of figure this out. Particularly the first two bullets, as you start to try to write your abstract, if you haven't written many before, it's pretty surprising and shocking sort of how short 250 words or 150 words are, and you very quickly understand that a lengthy background statement of 3 or 4 sentences is probably going to be way too much, and again will scrunch or compress your ability to talk about the rest of your research in an effective way. Similarly, if you get too deep into the methodology of your work, you'll again make it impossible to get to the results or to the implications that you're going to be able to talk about. You're certainly going to want to avoid acronyms. While this is certainly the reviewers are going to be scientific. Are going to be scientists themselves, there's a good chance that they are not necessarily immediately familiar with the exact topic that you are talking about, and that there may be so that's important not only to use language and avoid jargon that may be unique to your particular field, but also to make sure that you define any acronyms that you use, so that folks are not sort of put off and can't follow easily the argument that you're making in the abstract itself. And then finally, you want to also make sure that the abstract is truly meant to be a distillation of the research that you have done, and indeed it is not appropriate to push beyond what is actually presented in the paper or the poster or in the symposium. And really the abstract is meant to reflect the science that actually has been done. So you want to make sure not to overstep in that way. And then finally, if you go to the last slide, it's important to get some help. I think as we know, all writing is good writing. And we all know that the challenges of writing short, pithy and compelling abstracts and any kind of communications is quite challenging. So it's really important, and we always believe at SCP that communications is a team effort. It's a collaborative meaning-making process. So it really does make sense to get help from others and to try out your abstract and your approach with others to get feedback and to make sure that the assumptions that you're making are not lost on others. So really getting a mentor or a peer to review your abstract to make sure that it seems appropriate and clear and again persuasive, compelling, distinctive is really helpful. And of course GSA, as part of all this great support that is available both online and in other places, GSA offers through its Emerging Scholar and Professional Organization the ability to get feedback on particularly on the style and approach of your abstract. And if you write to espo@gerin.org by February 26th, you'll be assured of getting some feedback from that group or from a representative of that group in time for you to submit your abstract. So again, a number of things to think about here. I think my main takeaway is twofold. One is that is to get started now, thinking not only about your abstract and the core messages and message that you want to carry in that abstract. And second, to give yourself plenty of time so that you can distill down and rewrite the abstract sufficiently so that it is not only the right length, but that it covers the ground and describes the exciting research that you've actually done in a compelling and important way. So I'll take a breath there, and I don't know if there are any questions, and if not, we can turn it over. But I'll take a breath, and Rachel, maybe if there are questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thanks so much, John. We don't have any questions at the moment, so we can keep going. And
Great.
If anyone has any questions for John, please feel free to send them over, and we can ask them at the end.
Great. So I guess I'll be turning it over to Dr. Sarah Morman, who is the meeting's program co-chair from Boston College, to explain some of the mysteries, the further mysteries of the abstract submission process. Dr. Morman.
Thank you, John. I'll tell you the mysteries about what happens after you hit submit on your abstract.
Yeah.
Once your abstract has been submitted, you can continue to make edits up until the March 15th deadline, and you will not have to pay again so long as what you're doing is modifying your existing submission. But after March 15th passes, that's the deadline, no edits can be made. After March 15th, there are a few steps that occur internally at GSA to build the program. The first is the peer review process. In February, GSA recruits its members to review abstracts. And if you are a GSA member, be on the lookout for the email because you can sign up. And if you are new to the process, it can be very useful to see what other people are writing in their submissions, how they're structuring abstracts and so on. When someone applies to review, they select between 2 and 6 session codes that they have expertise in. And then peer reviewers are randomly assigned to abstracts that have listed that session code that they selected to review. Each abstract will be reviewed by 3 to 4 peer reviewers, so it gets multiple looks. The reviewers assign the abstract a score ranging from 1 to 7 based on the review criteria. Just a reminder that abstracts must be based on original scholarship, and both empirical and theoretical or conceptual contributions are welcome. In both cases, abstracts must report realized results and not promised results, and or summarize major conclusions. Because these are the following items that we consider during the review process. First, we look for a clear statement of research aims and how the work is significant. Second, we look for specificity and appropriateness of methods. Third, we look for specificity of key findings. That may be the results from an empirical investigation or the major conclusions from a conceptual or theoretical piece. And I want to highlight again that those are extremely important. If you write in your abstract that results will be forthcoming or something along those lines, your abstract will not get accepted. A fourth thing that reviewers look for is clarity of the theoretical and or applied implications, policy and practice. And a fifth item is that GSA is committed to the Reframing Aging project. So within your submission, avoid categorical terms for older adults such as the aged or the elderly. And if you would like further details about language issues, visit the Frameworks Institute for further details. And that's online. Then, once the reviews are complete, the program committee begins the decision and sessioning process. The section representative on the program committee will be assigned the abstracts submitted to their section. They'll determine which abstracts to accept or reject based on the peer reviews. Once decisions are made, posters and papers are grouped together into sessions, typically using the session codes and otherwise grouping similar topics together. Papers and poster submissions may be changed to the other presentation type. That is, a paper may become a poster and a poster may become a paper. if needed based on topics and space availability and arrangement of the program. The last step in the process is to schedule all the sessions. Due to the volume of sessions, there's usually over 450, it's a master puzzle. We look at session codes first in order to avoid topic overlap, and then first author conflict check to make sure that no first authors are scheduled at the same time, and so on. Once the schedule is approved by the section representatives, notifications are distributed to the individuals who submitted the abstracts. And we ask that individuals share the notification with any co-authors. I hope this has provided some insight into the abstract process, and thanks for your time.
Thank you, Sarah. Let's turn to any questions there are from the attendees. Rachel, do you have questions to share?
Yeah, we have a couple that have come through. This question, I think, Sarah, for you probably would be best. Is there a separate review process for abstracts submitted by students?
No, there is not. The abstract review process is blind, such that the reviewers can't see who the authors are.
And then another question just came through, and I can answer this one. If an abstract for a paper is accepted, what size should a submitted paper be? And we actually don't require a full paper to be submitted after the abstract submission process. So you don't have to prepare anything else. We do, if you would like to use a PowerPoint presentation, you will have to submit that in advance of the meeting.
And let me add that if you do submit a paper and a paper for the paper presentation and it's accepted, there will be a chair assigned to the set of 4 or 5 papers that they put together in your session, and the session chair would be someone to talk to about, well, how many minutes will I get to speak and when will we ask questions and all that. That would be the person to contact about exactly how it's going to go. Do I have this much time or that much time? And they should be helpful there. We also have generic advice to anybody, but really the session chair, once you see who it is going to be a help on this point.
And then, Dave, a question that I think you may be able to answer is, can you submit an abstract that has been presented at another conference but has not been published elsewhere?
Or
do you want me to answer it, Dave?
Yeah, you're catching me flat-footed because this is a kind of a little bit of a nuanced thing here.
Right. So materials that have been previously published or presented at other conferences cannot be submitted unless there is substantial elaboration, like you've had additional findings or additional conclusions from your initial submission or publication.
So if the first paper was blood pressure in the right arm and the second paper is blood pressure in the second arm, maybe not. In the left arm, maybe not. Maybe not.
Right. And maybe Mars can answer this one. Is it better to submit a paper versus a poster?
It's good to submit. So make sure you submit. There are advantages and drawbacks to each approach. A poster presentation means that you do all the work in advance to get all your ideas together, literally to post them on a 4x8 foot piece of paper or a cloth, and then you stand by your poster as people walk by. Some people will just keep walking by. Other people will stop and talk with you. So that format is informal, and you get to know people that way. If you give a paper, it's much more formal. You will be standing up at a podium, speaking to a group of people that could be as small as 8 or as large as 80, and you will have a short amount of time, really probably around 10 minutes, to talk about your whole study and the findings. And then the session chair might wait till everybody presents and then open up for questions, and then you would respond to questions in front of the full group. So neither one is good or bad. They're both as prestigious in terms of your resume and building experience, but they are a very different experience. Some of my research I prefer to do on posters because I'm trying to collect information from people and I want to get into big conversations with them. For other things, it's fun to be part of a collection of papers or part of a symposium. So just be mindful that for GSA purposes, we may need to switch you. Even if you said you wanted to do a poster, it might work out better for us if you do a paper, and vice versa. Either way, you're getting your work out there, you're getting your name out there, and you're helping networking. And that's really the name of the game. The GSA meeting is the best place in the world to be networking with other scholars in gerontology. This is the creme de la creme. So you want to be part of this. You want to be part of the whole program. Submit your ideas through an abstract. And whether it's a paper or a poster, they're both wonderful options.
Thanks, Merce. And I'll throw this question out there that just came through. One of you maybe can answer it. Do the actual statistics and numbers, means, for example, have to be reported in the abstract?
Sarah, you're a little bit of a quantoid. What would you say?
Yeah, I can answer that. It can be a bit of a stylistic thing. Sometimes I like to report specific numbers because they underline for the reviewer that I have specific numbers to present, which means that I've done the work and I have results. However, sometimes it can be awkward to say a 1 unit increase in my predictor variable created a 2.356 increase in my dependent variable. And so you might want to say stylistically something more descriptive, like there was a significant positive association between X and Y. So it's not required for certain that you report numbers, but they can be a useful rhetorical tool.
Rachel?
A couple more.
Okay, go ahead.
Dave?
No, go ahead.
If my abstract is accepted, do I have to register and pay to attend the meeting?
Yes, all speakers must register to attend. The majority of anyone that you'll see attending a GSA meeting, they're also presenting on the program. So registration for the meeting is going to open in late June. Now, you will not, if you submitted an abstract, you will not be notified that that abstract, what the fate of that abstract is until early in July. But pretty soon after that, you can register for the meeting. And also want to advise you, on September 13th, the registration for the meeting will go from a little less to a little bit more. So there's an early bird registration before September 13th. Afterwards, it's more, but you should know by then. So yes, be prepared to register.
I would say that it's also useful to register early if you would like to stay in the conference hotel, because the conference hotels fill up pretty quickly. Certainly there are many other hotels in Boston and you might want to stay further away, but if you want to stay at the conference hotel, useful to register in the early bird period.
That's a great point, Sarah. Thank you. That's all the questions we have. Dave, if you have anything else you want to touch base on, you can take it away.
So what we haven't mentioned is that there's a fee for submitting to the GSA, submitting an abstract. Could you run down what those fees are, Rachel?
Yes, let me pull them up real fast. So we have the professional paper poster fee is $30. The student rate for a paper poster is $20, and the symposium is $40. And I'll note that the symposium fee is just one fee for the entire symposium. So the chair would submit that fee. They don't have the individual abstract submitters do not have to submit a fee. The fee is a non-refundable processing charge, so if you do not get accepted, it is not refundable after the fact. And you'll submit your abstract, pay your fee. If you have any edits to make to your abstract, I think Merce made this note that you can go back in up until the deadline to make edits to your abstract.
And the fee applies to the abstract, not to the number of co-authors that are on the abstract. So there's one fee for that abstract, no matter how many the co-authors are. And John was talking about abstract style and form. Is it true that the abstracts from the recent San Francisco meeting are accessible in the journal Innovation and Aging? That's true?
That is correct. They are posted on the website. If you go to www.geron.org and go to the Publications tab, you can access Innovation and Aging, which is an open access journal, so anyone can access them. You don't have to be a member of GSA. And there's a supplement of all of the abstracts that were presented at the IAGG meeting this last July.
And that was also a 250-word abstract, same length?
Yes, same exact format for characters and titles and objectives. So
that one would be able to find many models there and trying to understand exactly how to, if you can't figure out how to compress my, my methodological details, you could see maybe get some tips from some of those. If not, also from a mentor where you are locally.
Yeah, I mean, I reviewed. I was able to get in there and review a number of them, and again, I think there are a lot of examples of how to structure the abstract and make it sing.
Sarah or Mercedes, any other thoughts?
I would just say that if you're participating in the GSA meeting by sharing your ideas and your research, it just bumps up the fun for you, because it really is a wonderful way to meet people who are also interested in what you're interested in. And often you meet people who you would be part of a symposium the next year, now that you found your peeps at GSA. So I really strongly encourage you to attend the meeting and participate in it.
I think I'd like to point out that in addition to the scientific sessions, the conference has a number of other interesting features, such as meetings of interest groups across several dozen areas. And there's a breakfast for new members, there's a breakfast for students, there are a variety of keynote type of presentations, and there's just a lot to do at the meeting that I think I always find very useful in addition to presenting my work.
Let me end by saying one point that was made in the earlier presentations is don't wait until the last minute. You would be flabbergasted to hear about which percent of all the abstracts that are going to be submitted, how many will be submitted on that day, March 15th. Is it over 80%, Rachel? What's our experience?
Yes, you are correct. We get the majority of the submissions those last 2 days and on the deadline.
And on the deadline. So, and we're using a software that has been used successfully once in the past. So if you have any worry about the rest of us crushing the software, then maybe start a few days early to get this task done and not chew your nails over it. So this hour is coming to a close. We've covered a lot of information, and we're lucky to have gathered these leaders as well as you for the webinar today. So thank you to Sarah and John and Mercedes. And as a reminder, this webinar was recorded and will be shared via email and on GSA Connect later this week. To keep the conversation going, please head over to GSA Connect to ask any additional questions that you have. And I want to thank our speakers and our attendees today. We're looking forward to seeing you in Boston.